Today we're talking crankbaits. How many of these do we really need to carry around, and what the heck is the difference between all of them? Today we're headed underwater for a closer look, so let's dive in deep with crankbaits. Crankbaits come in sizes from less than an inch up to massive crankbaits for musky fishing. So which one should you buy? As you can see from this pile of crankbaits, you should pick up a bunch of different styles for different fishing conditions. But what makes these crankbaits different from each other? Let's take a look at this one first. This is a classic crankbait and one of the first ever made, the original floating Rapala. This is a floating bait obviously, and it's made from balsa wood, which is very lightweight and very buoyant. The small lip allows it to dive down a few feet and rise back up if the retrieve is stopped. You can cast it in very shallow water because you can control how deep it dives based on the speed of your retrieve. The lure action is a very consistent wobble in the water, but not anything too exciting. Generally, the narrower the lure's body is, the tighter the movement is. Now let's look at this Berkley Flicker Shad and what's different about it. The profile is much taller, it's made of hard plastic, has rattling beads inside, and has a very attractive holographic finish. The lure moves with a very fast, tight wobble, and the holographic pattern produces a ton of flash and vibrant color. Here's another one with a more natural appearance and a translucent body. The translucent body allows us to actually see the rattling beads inside, which are striking against each other and also bouncing off the sides of the body to create vibrations. Now what's the deal with flash, rattles, and colors anyway, and why does that matter? Rattling crankbaits are designed to call a fish in before they can actually see the bait. Fish can sense vibrations in the water with a sensory system called their lateral line. The lateral line is a system of nerves along the sides of the fish's body, and often across the fish's head too, especially on predatory fish like northern pike. These fish can use the lateral line nerves on their heads to detect disruptions or turbulence in the water around them, and this allows them to follow the exact path that their prey took even if they can't see those prey. Any lure will produce some level of vibration as it gets pulled through the water, but twitches, jerks, rattling baits, spinner blades, and other techniques or lure features can add a lot more vibration to get the attention of a hungry predator. Most crankbaits are effective when trolled or retrieved at a constant speed, but it's good to experiment with different speeds as well as twitches or pauses to get the fish to bite. This crankbait is a jointed version of the Flicker Shad. It has two sections which bang against each other during the retrieve, causing intense vibrations. It also has rattle chambers inside like many crankbaits do. Some crankbaits have even more joints to create a very natural swimming motion and extra vibration. This bait here is usually considered a swim bait, but it's very similar to a crankbait with its diving lip and hard plastic body. This is a Savage Gear 4-play minnow in the 8-inch size, so it's primarily thrown for muskies, big pike, and other large predatory fish. The body sections have rattle chambers inside, but the sections themselves also bang against each other as it swims, and you can see that clearly here when I slow down the movement of the lure. I love how realistic this bait looks, especially the gill pumping action from the first and second sections. It's an expensive bait, but I've been pretty impressed with it. Okay, now let's move back to the skinnier minnow style crankbaits. These baits can be retrieved steadily, they can be twitched, or they can be used as jerk baits. Some of them sink, some float, and some are suspending. Suspending jerk baits are some of the most effective baits for bass and pike in cold water. They get the fish's attention and then pause right there in the strike zone, which the bass usually sees as an easy meal. Fish in cold water are usually sluggish and will not spend a lot of energy chasing down a smaller fish, so they are looking for easy meals like injured minnows. As far as jerkbaits go, there are a ton of good jerkbaits out there, but my favorite is the Rapala RipStop. It's a somewhat expensive lure, but I really like the action and the flash that it gives off. It looks good as it's retrieved or jerked, and the suspending action gives the bass a chance to grab that lure without having to chase it down. This one here is a Rapala Countdown. It's a sinking bait that the company says will sink at 1 foot per second. It is designed to give an angler the ability to target a specific depth or get down to fish that are hanging out really deep. Lipless crankbaits are good at this too, and we'll talk more about those ones later. Keep in mind that the actual sinking rate of a lure like this depends on the type of line that you're using. Thicker lines and buoyant lines like monofilament will cause it to sink more slowly. A small diameter braided or fluorocarbon line will allow a lure to sink or dive more quickly, whether it's a countdown or any other lure. It would also allow a diving crankbait to dive to a greater maximum depth. Let's talk more about diving depth. This crankbait here is a shallow diver, and we know that because of the short lip. Generally, the longer the lip is, the farther it will dive to. The maximum diving depth is kind of a misleading term because it's really a maximum angle that the lure can achieve relative to your line. You can see this diving depth chart from Berkley for their Flicker Shad 7s. It shows that this lure will struggle to reach 10 feet deep with 50 feet of line out. But if you let out 150 feet of line, you can expect the lure to reach a depth of 15 feet. The depth is a little more with braided fireline on this graph because it's less buoyant and a smaller diameter than the monofilament trilene. Look at the diving angle produced by this shallow diving Rapala floating minnow compared to the intense angle this flicker minnow can achieve with its huge lip. This Salmo Freediver claims to dive to a crazy depth of 30 feet. For a floating lure, this is ridiculously deep, but useful when targeting deep fish like salmon, lake trout, or walleyes. Check out the monster lip on this thing. Okay, let's talk about colors. Colors can be really important for a few reasons. If you're fishing in dirty water, the fish won't actually see your bait until it's pretty much right in their face. This means the color is not as important, and it doesn't necessarily have to accurately match the fish's usual prey in that lake or river. You'll want to pick a color that is either very bright or flashy in order to get the attention of the fish and give them something to focus on once they get close to it. Rattling baits are also helpful here to call in the fish from a greater distance than they can actually see your bait from. Notice how you can hear the rattles in this crankbait before you can actually see the bait. A fish will swim toward this vibration in the water until it can see the bait, and then it usually darts up to it and strikes. I like to use bright silver, bright gold, or chartreuse crankbaits in dirty water to make it easier for the fish to find them. This Berkley Power Rattle has the advantage of big rattle chambers and also a shiny body that throws bright flashes of light like the scales of a baitfish. The soft tail gives it a more natural feeling in the fish's mouth, so it holds on longer and gives you more opportunity to feel the fish and set the hook. Colors of crankbaits are nearly endless. Keep in mind the old saying that fishing lures are better at catching fishermen than fish. This is especially true nowadays when lure patterns are incredibly detailed and realistic. Case in point, this Yozuri crayfish crankbait. It's a really cool looking lure that does a nice job imitating the appearance and backward swimming action of a crayfish. This bait is best worked by jumping it backward off the bottom and letting it settle back down, much like a crayfish fleeing from a predator. I bought this to use when targeting bowfin and pre-spawn bass. I've only gotten to use it once so far, so time will tell whether it's as attractive to the fish as it was to me. Red crayfish crankbaits are popular baits during the pre-spawn bass season, especially in the southern US where red crayfish species are the most common. They're still effective in northern states, although most of our crayfish species are actually tan or brown, not red. Another action that lure manufacturers strive for is an erratic swimming action. Most manufacturers claim that a more erratic action will entice more strikes. If you're looking for a ridiculously erratic swimming action, I've never seen anything swim less predictably than a storm Hottentot. You never know where this thing is going to swim, and good luck trying to keep it swimming straight for more than a second. What I like most about this bait is the flash created by the stainless steel lip. It almost looks like a headlight on the front of this thing. It's a really cool bait that I like to use in cloudy water because of that intense flash and the wide wobbling action that creates a ton of vibration. The next category is the lipless crankbaits. Lipless cranks are heavy, sinking crankbaits. They can be fished as deep as you want, but they're also good in shallow water too. The nose down swimming position of the bait allows it to bump off of rocks and stumps really well, and you can see how the head of the lure acts as sort of a shield for the hooks. This somewhat prevents the lure from getting snagged. You'll still get snagged with them, but not as much as you might with a different type of lure. One of the ways that a lipless crankbait is fished is called a yo-yo retrieve. This is where the angler lifts and lowers the rod during the retrieve to pop the bait up and down in the water. It gives off a quick series of rattles and flashes, and it helps to attract a fish in. Lipless crankbaits are pretty versatile in the way that they can be fished, so it's worth experimenting with to see what catches you the most fish. Now let's talk squarebills. These are usually smaller, fatter crankbaits that have a short, square lip on them. They are usually very buoyant and they can be built from balsa wood or tough plastic. Squarebills are meant to be tossed into rock piles, gravel bars, and other hard structure, so they're built to withstand a lot of banging into things. They retrieve with a nose-down position like a lipless crankbait does, and the wide bill helps to deflect the bait away from rocks and stumps before the hooks contact them. They will still get snagged sometimes, but they're very good baits for thick, hard cover. If you do get stuck on a rock, you can usually stop your retrieve and the bait will float its way right out of the snag. Lastly, let's talk equipment real quick. I do not have a special crankbait rod, nor do I think I really need one. I think most medium light to medium heavy rods will do just fine depending on the weight of the lure and the type of fish that you're targeting. Obviously, if you're targeting muskies or stripers, you'll probably want to go with a heavy or extra heavy to give you the power that you need. Big musky crankbaits have huge hooks that require a lot of power to drive into a musky's mouth. As far as a good knot to use with crankbaits, you'll often hear that a loop knot is best, but I personally don't use loop knots very much. I prefer to use a crankbait snap, which gives the same freedom of movement to the lure as a loop knot does, but it allows me to tie a stronger knot and change out lures really easily. We tested a bunch of different knots and were disappointed in the performance of loop knots, and we also tested the effect of a snap on a crankbait's action, and we didn't see much effect. Both of those test videos are linked in the video description below, and please consider giving this video a thumbs up and subscribing to our channel if you haven't already. Thanks a lot for watching, and we'll catch you next time.